The Saturday Category Sleepers series is back here at RotoWire. We've got the compilers today. Who are some late round targets for runs and RBI? We've got the answers in a minute here on RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. And hello and welcome everybody to the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Fantrax. Erik Halterman here with Ryan Boyer. Ryan, good to talk to you again. How has your fantasy baseball offseason been? You've been busy. I think we've even run into each other in the draft pool at some point. So I know you've been at least somewhat busy.
Yeah, I mean, it's never really an off season, just kind of a different way of going about things, different day-to-day responsibilities, but it's a year-round commitment, taking care of a few drafts, and we're ready for pitchers and catchers to report next week. I'm excited to get this Saturday podcast fired back up.
Yeah, plenty of excellent off-season writing from you as well, Ryan. Listeners can use promo code YouTube15 for 15% off a RotoWire subscription. Check out some of your off-season deep dives. We'll be getting into the main topic of today's show, the Runs and RBI Sleepers, in a few minutes. But as always, want to start with the headlines, which are very Yankee-focused today because Paul Goldschmidt is back. This is a signing that I don't think fantasy players were expecting, and I don't think fantasy players are going to be very happy with, at least the ones who've been pushing Ben Rice further and further up the board. It looked like Ben Rice might have a pathway to be a true everyday first baseman, but that can't be the case anymore after this, right? If you sign Paul Goldschmidt to a real major league contract, you're going to give him some playing time. How do you see the situation playing out for the Yankees at first base and I guess catcher and DH as well, the other spots where Ben Rice might find himself in the lineup?
Yeah, Yankees very, very committed to running it back with basically the same roster they had last season. We heard during the winter meetings, I mean, they seemed very adamant, Aaron Boone especially, that Ben Rice was going to get everyday at bats, or at least significantly more at bats against left-handed pitching. But as you mentioned, you don't re-sign Paul Goldschmidt and not play him against lefties. I mean, that's basically the only good thing he can do anymore is hit left-handed pitching. So it's a modest contract, $4 million. I think he can get a little more in an incentive. So that's not a big commitment. Maybe he's more of a just faces tough lefties and comes off the bench to pinch hit. But I'm worried that at least maybe this is good for Ben Rice from a rate stats perspective, but from accumulation, it's hard to see this as anything other than a ding to his outlook. Uncle Ted mentions here that Rice could catch against lefties. I have seen that as a potential speculation. Maybe that's the case. Maybe that's enough. Maybe he'll do it enough to at least retain that catcher eligibility heading into 2027. That's a long way off, though. We're looking more at redraft right now. And for me, it's just hard to see this as anything other than a little bit of a negative for Ben Rice. Still a big fan. The price is very high, maybe a little too high for my taste, but does have that catcher eligibility still, and definitely a believer in the skill set, but Goldschmidt's going to cut into that playing time for sure.
Yeah, I think you need to believe that Rice will catch against lefties if you're still going to be interested in him near his inflated price, because the reason for that inflated price was partially that Ben Rice is a very good hitter and the underlying numbers fully back that up and suggest he could be even better. But it was also the fact that Ben Rice might have led all catcher eligible players in plate appearances this season if he was a true everyday first baseman. That doesn't look like it's the case anymore. And now if you're projecting him just to be, 8th in plate appearances or 5th or whatever it is, then I don't think that the days of seeing Ben Rice go even ahead of Cal Raleigh like I've seen on one draft board, those are probably over. There's some more Yankees news, though. There was word recently that Jason Dominguez could be stuck opening the year in the minors, and was that before the Goldschmidt signing, I believe, that report came out. So that this could mean there's really just not a lot of roster spots on this Yankees team. And do they want one of those going to a player who could just be a backup outfielder? I mean, the way the Yankees have currently set up their team, I'm not sure Jason Dominguez is going to play very much. He's a switch hitter, but hasn't been able to hit lefties. And you look at that outfield, Trent Grisham, Cody Bellinger are lefties. Aaron Judge is not going to move. He's going to play every single game. Giancarlo Stanton, I guess, will sit some, but there's not a path to many starts per week for Jason Dominguez. Do you believe this noise that he might really start the year in the minors?
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately, as a someone who has Jason Dominguez in a dynasty league, is continuing to wait out until he gets that everyday playing time, but certainly doesn't look like it's going to happen, at least at the beginning of this season. I mean, he's just a Giancarlo Stanton injury away from playing every day, so that could certainly happen. But on paper right now, it's difficult to see a fit for a bunch of at-bats for him. As you mentioned, a switch hitter that really doesn't hit left-handed pitching very well. So, I mean, he's in an outfield with 2 left-handed hitters and Aaron Judge. So it's just a difficult fit for Jason Dominguez right now. And additionally, I know we have on our rundown here as well with Anthony Volpe likely out until May. And that's kind of tied together with Dominguez as well, because right now Oswaldo Cabrera is projected as the backup shortstop behind Caballero. And there's probably not room on the bench for Cabrera and Jason Dominguez. So it certainly looks trending that way, that Jason Dominguez is going to start at AAA. But doesn't really have much to prove in the minors anymore. But it's just the mechanics of that roster right now are not favorable for him. But again, just a Giancarlo Stanton injury away from everyday playing time. So I'm not ready to completely dismiss Jason Dominguez, even in your redraft leagues. But on paper, not a favorable playing time situation for him.
Yeah, that sounds right. So still has certainly some value in a longer-term league, but not sure I'd like Jason Dominguez until his price comes pretty far down for 2026 drafts. You mentioned that Anthony Volpe news. He is expected to be out until May, at least. I think this was not known, but it was known that Volpe was unlikely to be ready right at the start of the season as he recovers from shoulder surgery. Do you think it's probably just going to be Jose Caballero starting at shortstop, which probably makes him even more of an interesting sleeper than he would otherwise be, unless you're going to stump for Ahmed Rosario or non-roster invitee Paul DeJong? It seems like the main fantasy impact here is Caballero probably actually going to get basically a starting role for a month before going back to his heavily used utilities job.
Yeah, I mean, and we can't really rule out him kind of running away with that job as well. I mean, there were lots of calls for him to be starting over Anthony Volpe anyway late in the year. I think he even got at least a playoff start or two over Volpe. How much that shoulder injury that wound up requiring surgery for Volpe affected him. I mean, Aaron Boone, I know ideally would like to keep Caballero in that super utility role. He's just so handy to have, and extremely handy to have for fantasy purposes as well, because he's got kind of that basically eligibility everywhere. And he's shown in the past that he can steal a ton of bases even when he isn't even playing every day. So while he's getting everyday reps in that lineup and in that park, it's a very positive outlook for Caballero.
All right, we got one more piece of news to talk about here. maybe not fantasy relevant. I'd say probably not fantasy relevant, but it might be. Scott Barlow has signed with the Sacramento Athletics. Any other bullpen probably wouldn't be talking about Scott Barlow here, but he's somebody who we considered as a potential closer in Cincinnati last year, went on to produce an ERA in the low fours for the third year in a row and the fifth time in his career. That's probably all Scott Barlow is, but would you maybe throw a dart at him in this A's bullpen? It's not like any other names, Justin Sterner, Elvis Alvarado, Mark Leiter. I mean, none of those are inspiring either.
Yeah, I think he's more of a, I could see maybe in 15 teamers, he's probably more of like a draft champions type target for me. But as you mentioned, I mean, out of the options in that bullpen, I mean, he's got by far the most closing experience. Maybe that doesn't matter that much to Mark Kotze, but it could. Scott Barlow is really not that good anymore. He can still miss bats, though. The control's been really bad. And that park, especially where they're playing their home games right now, I'm not confident that any of those guys can hold on to the closer job for very long. But yeah, he's more of a late round dart throw in the deepest of leagues, but a little bit notable nonetheless.
Yeah, maybe your closer 4 in a draft champions league or something like that. We're about to move on to the main topic, but I did want to quickly touch on this question from RotoWire's NHL writer Paul Bruno, asking about the Blue Jays' Jose Berrios. Outlook on him. I'd say the outlook mostly quite negative. Fantasy drafters have just anointed Cody Ponce as the number 5 in Toronto, even though it's not 100% clear that that's actually the case. But I did just look up Puerto Rico's World Baseball Classic roster, and I do not see Jose Berrios on it. Now, I know a lot of Puerto Rican players failed to get insurance this year. Some weird thing was going on with that team and not others, but would have to think he would be available.
And he had the elbow issue at the end of last season too, so that could.
And that's where I was going. This was my way of checking. Does Jose Berrios still have elbow issues? This would lean towards maybe. So I'd say the outlook there probably doesn't look good, but good news for anybody who is speculating on Cody Ponce. We are going to move on to our runs and RBI sleepers right after this message from our sponsor, Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes it easy. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. Fantrax offers the most in-depth player pool in the industry, including minor league players. Do you need a customizable commissioner service for your fantasy league? Fantrax offers more customization than any other platform. Waivers, categories, scoring systems, schedule. Fantrax offers custom solutions for all that and more, and it's all free. Sign up for free today. Simply go to fantrax.com/rotowire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/rotowire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. And welcome back, everybody, to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Erik Halterman and Ryan Boyer here, starting our Category Sleepers series. So for the next 5 Saturdays, we'll be looking at 2 categories at a time, trying to find players going after pick 200 using the NFBC ADP over the last few weeks. Players after pick 200 who could still be a pretty big help in that one category and maybe are just generally high upside late round picks as well. I do want to start for each of these categories with just the basic question: what do you actually look for to try to find a sleeper in this category? So let's start with runs today, Ryan. What do you look for to find a runs sleeper?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I mean, this is a accumulator category. It's not a rate category. So what do we want for people that are accumulating? We want them in the lineup every day. That's the best way to pile up stats. I mean, if you're a righty that's facing righties and lefties, if you're a lefty that's facing righties and lefties, you got to pile up those counting stats. Ideally, you'd also like them hitting toward the top of the lineup. Ideally, you would also like them in a good lineup. They're not always going to check off all these boxes. That's why they're being drafted after pick 200. But you want them to have as many of those qualities as possible. And generally, it also just helps if they're good hitters as well.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, that's really the biggest qualifier. But when you're looking for a later round sleeper, I mean, you want someone to play every day. I think is the most important factor there.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at. Guys who could play every day, and crucially, guys who could hit first or second in the order if we're specifically looking for run sleepers. I mean, at one point, I was literally just going through our projected lineups and looking at every leadoff and number 2 guy and saying, do I really believe that he is the leadoff and number 2 guy? If he's, the 500th pick in the draft, I'll have one guy here who's got an ADP outside 550, but I believe he's projected to be the number 2 hitter on a pretty bad team. So guys like that, provided they keep the job all year, which we can certainly discuss, could give you plenty of runs. Does your first guy fit into that category, Ryan?
Well, kind of. We have him projected about 3rd versus righties and 7th versus lefties, so not the perfect spot there, but is projected to be an everyday player. That's Daylen Lile of the Nationals. Quick little trivia question for you, Erik. Highest expected batting average in all of baseball last season is?
I'm going to say Aaron Judge.
Oh, no, it's Daylen Lile.
Oh, similar players.
How about that? Expected batting average last season was 302, which was, as I mentioned, highest in all of baseball. He batted 299, so right there. 16% strikeout rate. Very encouraging for a rookie just getting his feet wet in the majors, only striking out at that clip. Also second in all of baseball in launch angle sweet spot rating. Mike Trout actually number 1 in that category. So maybe he's not totally cooked. Very strong finish for Daylen Lile in September, 391, 440, 772. 6 home runs, 19 RBI, and 20 runs in September for the Nationals. As far as just that month, second in all of baseball in weighted runs created plus and weighted on base average. Number 1 in that category is that Aaron Judge guy. Pretty good company there for Daylen Lile. And as I mentioned before, we have him projected about 3rd against righties, 7th against lefties. Not exactly runs scored spots necessarily, but I think the Nationals in their rebuilding phase committed to playing Daylen Lile every day. He was never a really super highly regarded prospect, former 2nd round pick, but I mean, he's still just 23, and the way he finished last season, I think they're definitely committed to playing him every day. Should get the opportunities against lefties as well, even if he gets off to a slow start in that regard. He is a left-handed hitter. But I think it's encouraging, as I mentioned before, that low strikeout rate is a guy just breaking into the big league. So I like Daylen Lile as a late round runs target.
Yeah, I can get behind that as well. I was just checking where Daylen Lile peaked in our prospect rankings. He peaked at 158. So this is not a premium prospect, as you said. I see Fangraphs has him as a future 45, which is, a fringe, a 2nd division regular, they say. Despite that lack of prospect pedigree, he's produced at every level of the minors, and he produced as a rookie last year. So it's a bit surprising to see such little fanfare surrounding him. I guess it's that he seems to be a corner outfielder without much power, but certainly seems to have the contact and can get on base and can score runs too. So I like Daylen Lile as a run sleeper. My first guy today might not be totally following the outline that I just mentioned, because Kazuma Okamoto is not currently projected to hit at the top of the order for the Toronto Blue Jays, but by including him here, I'm saying, what if he does? Or at the very least, you should target Kazuma Okamoto late in your draft. for runs being only one of the many things he might be able to provide. We are currently projecting him as the number 6 hitter against righties and the number 4 hitter against lefties. And Okamoto certainly did show power over in Japan. He topped out at 41 homers in 2023. He had 30 homers 5 more times. Just last year, he had 15 in 69 games. Real power for Okamoto, but what attracts me more to his offensive profile is his control of the strike zone. Just this past year, he had as many walks as strikeouts, an 11.3% mark for both of those. He's always averaged a walk rate over 9.5%. So if somebody can get on base this much through walks and by getting his bat on the ball, I wouldn't be surprised if he actually hits near the top of the lineup. You know, if you pick him as a run sleeper and it turns out he's batting 5 or 6 and driving in runs instead, I think that'll be fine. I think this bat overall looks like it should be quite good for Okamoto. The projections are generally pretty convinced as well. Oopsie is the most tepid, giving him a 755 OPS, zips all the way up at 801. This is a guy who is universally projecting as an above average bat. You can get him in the 230s, and I think he's going to play potentially every day, partially because he's a right-hander, right? And they gave him a real contract. It was it $460? So he's making $15 million a year. That's way too much to give to a short side platoon bat. So even if it only sort of works out for Okamoto, I'm pretty sure he's starting against every lefty and most righties. So the counting stats are going to be there as long as he just stays on the field. Do you like Kazuma Okamoto as a run sleeper or as just a general late round bat, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, you never know how that transition's gonna go coming over from Japan, but by all accounts, pretty much he's about as polished as they coming over. Certainly controls the strike zone better than some of his Japanese brethren that we're going to talk about later in the RBI section. A little teaser for you there. But yeah, I like him. It's part of a good Toronto lineup and his ability to bounce around all over the field a little bit too.
All right, you got another top of the order guy for me?
I do. Otto Lopez of the Miami Marlins went 15-15 last season, and if you go back to 2024, also stole 20 bases that year in fewer games. So maybe a little bit more in the stolen base department in his bag of tricks for next season. This is certainly a possibility. Strikeout rate in the 90th percentile for Otto Lopez. Expected batting average in the 80th percentile. Actually hit 23 points lower his actual average than his expected batting average. So it looks like a little bad luck in that regard. Could be due for a bounce back there. Look at the hard hit rate, the average exit velocity, the barrel rate. Pretty underwhelming for Otto Lopez. But 90th percentile in squared up rate. You look on StatCast, also nearly 90% in zone contact rate. That's up there almost with the Luis Arias's, the Jacob Wilsons. It's just very good in zone contact rate for Otto Lopez. Probably ultimately more of an accumulator, but that's okay because he's got elite defense that's going to help keep him in the lineup every day for the Marlins. Also, right-handed bat, going to play against both righties and lefties. We haven't projected hit 5th against righties, but lead off against lefties. So it's not a, great skill set overall. But again, at this stage of the draft for your run sleepers, you're looking for someone who can accumulate. And I think Otto Lopez can do that, especially since he's going to stay in the lineup every day with that stellar glove at shortstop.
Yeah, seems to have a lot of the pieces. I think the floor is very high for Otto Lopez, who was 15-15 last year with a passable batting average 246. I don't see much reason to expect him going way down from that, and there's a chance he goes up as well. So I like Otto Lopez as a late round middle infielder. Another late round middle infielder here is Brendan Donovan, one of your former St. Louis Cardinals, Ryan. And after he was dealt to the Mariners, I was thinking that's probably a pretty bad move for your fantasy value. The Mariners have the toughest hitters park in the league. But thinking about this a little bit more, with how cheap Donovan is, it's pick 281 over the last 2 weeks. I'm sure the park matters, but also what matters is the fact that he's going to be leading off, it looks like, for quite a good Seattle lineup. And is the upgrade in lineup going to be enough to offset a downgrade in park, especially remembering that St. Louis isn't a great place to hit either. Nothing is Seattle, but so it's a more modest park downcrease than it would have been from elsewhere. There's very good context. I mean, this is a guy who probably is going to hit right in front of Cal Raleigh, perhaps, or right in front of Julio Rodriguez and Cal Raleigh in some order. That's a pretty good spot to be if you're looking to score runs. Brendan Donovan last year also showed a good barrel rate for the first time, which doesn't help that much in terms of run scoring. We really care about his on-base ability, which is absolutely there for Donovan. 361 OBP for his career, 353 last year. Consistently puts the ball in play a lot, a 13% strikeout rate last year while hitting 287. But if he's also hitting it a little bit harder, an 8.8% barrel rate last year, I'm pretty intrigued by Brendan Donovan in isolation. And I think the fact that he's going to be in such a good lineup spot is going to offset the tough park enough for me that I think Donovan is perfectly fine as a late round compiler, particularly in terms of runs. Do you think you'll still be on him in his new home?
Yeah, I'm with you that it's, I mean, he was never going to be a big home run guy anyway, regardless of where he wound up. So I don't think that going to that park in Seattle is really that big of a deal for him. I mean, maybe he can scrape by with double digits in home runs, but the important thing is he's going to be, all the Seattle beat writers are saying he's going to hit leadoff against both righties and lefties. Donovan's not a great hitter against lefties, so maybe that eventually changes. But certainly at least the beginning of the season sounds like he's going to be the leadoff guy against both righties and lefties. And as you mentioned, great guys in the lineup hitting behind him. Julio Rodriguez, Cal Raleigh, Josh Naylor, Randy Arozarena should be driven in a lot. Donovan's always a guy that's gonna get on base quite a bit. So especially at that price, I like that a lot. Other price I like, Gleyber Torres, back with the Tigers after taking that qualifying offer. Played through a sports hernia through at least the month of September. It's been difficult to find out when exactly he got hurt. The Tigers haven't really divulged that, and beat writers aren't really sure either. But at the very least, it seems like he played through it at least in September. And heading into that month, had a 366 on base percentage for the season, 119 weighted runs created plus through the end of August before he really tailed off in September. 16% strikeout, 16.1% strikeout rate, and a 13.5% walk rate last season for Gleyber Torres. Only Juan Soto had a lower chase rate among batted ball qualifiers than Gleyber Torres last season. And over the last 3 years, he's really become a great plate discipline guy. 17% strikeout rate, 11% walk rate for Gleyber Torres. Also very durable. He's averaged 655 plate appearances and 83 runs scored per season over that stretch. And he's been around so long that it seems like he should be older than he is, but he's still just 29. Doesn't feel like he should be in his 20s still, but theoretically still at his peak. And we have him projected to bat second against both righties and lefties. I think Gleyber Torres is one of those players that probably gets discounted because he's not a big standout in any one area, but he's a guy that's going to play every day. He gets on base, should have a pretty good lineup behind him. So I like him a lot to score a bunch of runs for the Tigers.
Yeah, Gleyber Torres never really developed into anything more than a mid to late round compiler type, but I think he certainly still is that, and certainly runs would be his likely biggest contribution. My next guy here is a former Tiger, and that is Willi Castro. who we don't currently project to bat in one of the top couple spots for his new team, the Rockies, but I would not be at all surprised if Willi Castro moves into the first or second spot. Ezequiel Tovar is the guy we currently project as their leadoff man. I wouldn't say Ezequiel Tovar is an on-base guy. He's never had a 300 on-base percentage. So Castro, who's only at 313 for his career, but was in the 330s in both 2023 and 2024, looks like a potential everyday or close to everyday leadoff man at Coors Field to me. Not a very good hitter. The strikeout rate has been a little bit worse than average for the last 2 years, and the hard hit numbers are also a little worse than average. But hey, on the Rockies, most of their players are a lot worse than average at one or both of those things. So the guy who's just kind of okay across the board, that might be all you need for a very prime role in the lineup at Coors Field. I should also say outfielders like Mickey Moniak and Jordan Beck, I think, are decent sleepers. They would have qualified, but I wasn't really sure if they're runs guys or RBI guys, maybe more on the RBI side. Rockies in general, I want to target pretty heavily in this range of the draft. And I think Willi Castro, who you can get just inside pick 300, I think he's probably going to be pretty useful, even if the WRC plus probably will end up being, 91. Who's your next guy here? Ryan, you got somebody more exciting than Willi Castro, I hope?
Yeah, I think so. We got a rookie who's yet to debut, but I think JJ Wetherholt's pretty much a lock for that second base job after the aforementioned Brendan Donovan was traded, and the beat writers for the Cardinals and the Cardinals themselves have basically said as much. They're giving him the runway to win that second base job. And JJ Wetherholt, one of the best prospects in all of baseball, just a fantastic season last year, split between double and triple A, 306, 421, 510, his slash line, 17 home runs, 23 stolen bases, elite plate discipline, just one fewer walk than strikeout, 72 to 73, 14.1% walk rate during his time in the minors, 418 on base percentage in the minors, just built to get on base. We have him projected right now to bat fifth against both righties and lefties. Certainly would not surprise me at all if he's eventually hitting first or second for the Cardinals. That it just seems like that's going to be the slot that he slides into, one of those two spots, and has a left-handed batter who has no issues against left-handed pitching. I think you never know how a player that age just breaking into the big leagues is going to handle that transition, but JJ Wetherholt certainly built like one of the prospects that should be able to hit the ground running at the major league level with that great plate discipline. Probably more ultimately a high floor guy than a high ceiling guy, although maybe a little underrated from a power perspective just because he's kind of a tinier guy, but he's got legitimate pop as well. I think he's going to be an across-the-board contributor. And if we get word in, mid to late March that he's indeed going to be winning that second base job, his ADP is going to go up even farther. So if you're in an earlier draft, now is the time to get JJ Wetherholt before his price skyrockets even more.
Yeah, a lot of potential there for JJ Wetherholt. What would you say is the vibe among St. Louis reporters or fans right now? Is it that Wetherholt is going to be handed the job? Is it going to be that it's an open competition, but we know that he's going to win it? Or is it going to be it's an open competition, but he's going to be up in May so that we can steal an extra year of team control? Has there been any clear leaning from the reporting?
I mean, I think he's going to have to honestly stumble not to win that job.
Okay.
They're just, Nolan Gorman is probably going to be at third base. He's played plenty of second too, but I think they want to give him a chance to settle into his natural position, and maybe that helps his offense as well if he's more of at a position that he's more comfortable with. But yeah, JJ Wetherholt, I would be surprised if he's not on the opening day roster. Could delay that free agency, but also they have the prospect incentive program as well, so that could be a factor. And Heimblum has also said that he's not going to weigh spring training numbers very heavily, which suggests to me that their mind is pretty much already made up. So yeah, I would be surprised if he's not in the opening day lineup.
All right, so Wetherholt does not yet have the job, but we're not very worried there. My next guy here has actually been predicted by one of our chatters here, Angelo. Chase Meidroth is the next guy on my list. You can get him quite late, pick 378 over the last couple weeks, and you can get him quite late for a reason. Chase Meidroth didn't do a whole lot in 505 plate appearances last year. Hit just 5 homers, stole 14 bases, 253 batting average. But I do expect him to be more or less locked into the leadoff job where he spent the majority of his time last year. If he's not leadoff, the place where he spent the second most time was batting second. Chase Meidroth, the skills that he does have at the plate are very much table setter type skills. In the minors, he was walking as much as 16% of the time, 19% of the time in his final season at the AAA level, while striking out just 13% of the time. Elite plate discipline. It turns out when you don't have that much power, it's hard to have a mid-teens walk rate in the majors because pitchers will throw a bunch of strikes at you, but he still walked 9% of the time, got to a respectable 329 on base percentage, which I think is only going to go up going forward. Makes a lot of contact, only struck out 14% of the time. A barrel rate of 1 point something was terrible, but the hard hit rate, 36%, that's actually not bottom tier. That's a guy who just has below average pop, not a guy who has none. So I think you could get, 12 homers or so, but really you just need him to hit it hard enough that his ground balls go through the infield, and there are way too many grounders here, a 53% ground ball rate. But it all adds up to a player who should set the table well enough, and certainly when the alternatives on the White Sox roster are as limited as they are, I would expect Chase Meidroth to be locked in as an everyday middle infielder and probably the number 1 or 2 hitter pretty much every day. I think he's going to set the table and score some runs. Last year, incidentally, 54 runs to go with just 23 RBI. So don't expect a lot of RBI. Very skewed projections in the counting stats here, but I agree with them. I think Chase Meidroth, a limited player, but a useful one as long as you're in a deep enough league. Do you see anything there with Meidroth, Ryan?
Yeah, I like the skill set with Meidroth. As you mentioned, more of a floor play than a ceiling play, but White Sox need that on base table setter like a Meidroth, and I'm with you. I think he's pretty much locked into an everyday role, and that robust walk rate carries over at all at the major league level. He should get on base plenty, even if it's not a dynamic 5 category skill set. He certainly should be useful. Another guy who's I wouldn't call him dynamic in terms of his skill set, at least offensively, but going to go with another Cardinal here. JJ Wetherholt's likely double play partner and Masyn Winn played through a meniscus tear for the bulk of last season, and his numbers suffered. I mean, I'm kind of just looking at 2024 as a baseline with him as far as the minimum I think he can give us. And that was 267, 314, 416 with 15 home runs, 11 steals, and 85 runs scored. Certainly the possibility that he could take another step forward from that, given the fact that he turns just 24 right before opening day. And that leadoff spot in the Cardinals lineup is open with Brendan Donovan being traded. I think Masyn Winn is probably the most likely option to fill that role, at least initially, as JJ Wetherholt breaks into the majors. We have him projected leadoff both against righties and lefties. Winn doesn't draw a ton of walks. He's probably never going to be a huge on-base guy, but kind of built to where he can hit for average and keep his OBP at a pretty good level in that regard. And he's, because of that great glove, coming off a Gold Glove season, he's going to be in the lineup every day, likely leadoff hitter. I think he's going to be maybe more of an accumulator than a great dynamic skill set from a rate stats perspective, but I have no concerns that Masyn Winn is going to play every day. So if he gets 600 plus plate appearances, I think he's going to score a lot of runs.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. I don't think it's a homer pick there to go back-to-back Cardinals. I think Winn, while he only had 9 homers and 9 steals last year, the playing time floor is so high that the other counting stats, the runs and some RBI, should certainly be there as long as he stays healthy. My final guy, we're going pretty deep in the draft here in Draft Champions Leagues over the last couple of weeks. Austin Martin has gone at pick 496. And I have to conclude based on that, the drafters are looking at the roster resource depth charts where Austin Martin is projected to be a short side platoon guy. They're not looking at the RotoWire depth charts where we currently have Austin Martin penciled in as the number 2 hitter against both righties and lefties. And, you know, I think I agree with RotoWire. Company man, sure. But I think Austin Martin is probably going to play for a Twins team that doesn't have a lot going on. Martin is a former 5th overall pick by the Blue Jays back in 2020, and he finally showed something at the major league level for the first time last year. He got a bit of playing time in 2024, didn't do a lot with it, but in 50 games last year, had a 113 WRC plus. He hit 282, only hit a single homer, but he did steal 11 bases. It's the plate discipline, which really stands out about Martin. A 17% strikeout rate to go with a 12% walk rate. That's the sort of thing you want near the top of your order. And he doesn't actually hit it that soft either. It's another guy who hits it in the ground too often, but a 39% hard hit rate, that's perfectly fine. This is not somebody who's just hitting weak grounders and trying to beat him out. He can get it through an infield. And mostly, to me, it's about the lack of alternatives in Minnesota. I mean, maybe you'll have Buxton and Keyshaw as your 1 and 2. I see roster resource that has it as Buxton, Keyshaw, Bell, Wallner, Jeffers. But if Austin Martin hits like he does last year, I think there's absolutely room for him in the number 2 hole there. I think that Austin Martin, if the playing time's there, he'll give you some speed. He'll give you an okay average, and I think he'll give you some runs as well. Not bad for a pick 496. Can you get behind it, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, he's, I think, pretty clearly going to fall short of what the expectations were when he was drafted. I think, fourth
Certainly.
overall. And
part of that is because he was a shortstop then, too, and now he's like a left fielder. But
yeah, the upside never came around with Austin Martin for a good athlete that thought could maybe blossom. But the plate skills are there, and as you mentioned, he makes a lot of sense to bat towards the top of that lineup. So I like that call.
All right, I see Uncle Ted mentions here that the Twins do have Walker Jenkins coming. Yeah, they do, but Austin Martin can play multiple spots on the field. Again, if he's hitting like he did last year, I don't think there will be enough other Twins who are hitting that well, so I think he'll have a spot in the lineup. Let's move on to our RBI sleepers, where, again, we should ask the overarching question, what actually makes a good RBI sleeper, Ryan? Pretty similar, I imagine, to runs, since this is another compiler stat.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to want same answer. You're going to want a guy that's going to be in the lineup every day. And just instead of maybe batting towards the top of that lineup, you're hopefully looking more towards the middle of that lineup. And again, it's not always going to be the case that they check off all those boxes, but that's the reason why they're being drafted as late as they are. But maybe you can spot a little value if you miss out on some bigger run producers early on in the draft.
Yeah, it's guys who hopefully will play every day, although I'll be okay with a strong side platoon bat as long as the power is high enough. I mean, then it's probably that platoon role that's pushing them into this part of the draft. As you said, a lot of these guys will have real contact concerns too, but the power is real. And if the power plays and gets them the playing time, you can get some nice RBI totals post pick 200, starting with who you got first, right?
Yeah, speaking of contact concerns, Munetaka Murakami, our big one of the big Japanese imports this offseason, obviously known for that power, averaged 33 home runs per season during his time in Japan, had a high of 56 home runs during the 2022 season, limited just 56 games due to injury last year, but hit 22 home runs in those 56 games. This guy legitimately has at least like a 70 grade power, maybe even 80 as far as raw power goes. But the rub is that he might not make a whole lot of contact. You look at the last 3 seasons in Japan, he had a strikeout rate of at least 28% each of those years. And you have to assume that that's probably going to go up at the major league level. But look at the projection systems. They still like Murakami to do what is basically expected of him from a power perspective, and that's Steamer, the bat, and Oopsie all have him hitting 30-plus home runs. They also have him batting in between 206 and 234, so I'm under no illusions that he's going to be anything other than a batting average drain, but I think he's going to make enough contact that when he does make that contact, he's going to hit the ball incredibly hard. And in a good park, 4 home runs. We have him currently projected 5th against righties and 6th against lefties. So there should be RBI opportunities available. Obviously, it's some level of a mystery box when anybody's coming over from overseas, and Murakami didn't wind up getting the contract a lot of people thought he did because there were the contact concerns. Maybe that's going to mean he's going to wind up being a bust, but I think he's going to make enough contact to where he's at least going to provide plenty of home runs and RBI, even if the rate stats and the batting average aren't great.
Yeah, it was only a 2-year deal for Murakami, but he is making $17 million a year, and that to me says that he's going to keep an everyday role. I think every day, not just large side platoon. He is a lefty here, unlike Kazuma Okamoto, but I think if you're paying a guy $17 million a year, he's an everyday player, even if he hits 195 for April and May, and he absolutely could. I think the BAT and the BAT X have a very eye-opening projection here for Murakami. They have him striking out 37.8% of the time and hitting just 206, but still getting to 77 runs and 77 RBI in only 548 plate appearances. I mean, he has that loud power that he can hit 206 and still be a pretty big contributor in the counting stats. They also give him 31 homers there, and I think that's a pretty reasonable outcome for Murakami. I think we can often get stuck on the flaws of players who have flaws, and we have to remember he's found success at one of the toughest leagues in the world despite this flaw. So other players have found success despite some contact concerns as well, and it looks like he has a pretty good chance of being one of them.
Joey Gallo had some good seasons too, so
yeah,
it is possible.
He might be a Joey Gallo comp, but that is not exclusively an insult. It will become an insult in a couple of years, but remember, Joey Gallo did have a couple 40 homer seasons, again, while hitting 206 and while striking out 37% of the time. That might be Munetaka Murakami. Another guy who's probably going to be pretty league dependent too. If you're in, say, a points league that penalizes for strikeouts, don't even think about it. If you're in a points league that doesn't penalize for strikeouts, though, should be probably a lot of doubles too, and you might even get something for his walks. So we'll see. My first RBI sleeper here is sort of an RBI sleeper, sort of just a generic sleeper. That's Jac Caglianone of the Royals, who you can get around pick 216. Caglianone is absolutely a classic sleeper in pretty much every sense of the word this year. This is somebody who had quite a lot of prospect pedigree, was just the 6th overall pick as recently as 2024, was excellent in the minors as well, and then was terrible in the majors. And by terrible, I mean terrible. He hit 157 with a 237 OBP, a 295 slug. That was over 62 games. This is not just, a couple weeks. It was all good for a 46 WRC plus, but dig even just a tiny bit under the hood and things look totally fine for Jac Caglianone. You see a 172 BABIP. League average there is around 290 or so. Nobody else who had at least 200 plate appearances was below 200, and he was all the way down at 172. And this is not some extreme fly ball hitter who you'd expect to have a low BABIP. He, in fact, hit it on the ground too much, a 50% ground ball rate. Doesn't hit it soft either. He had a 12% barrel rate, 42% hard hit rate. So Jac Caglianone made loud contact. He didn't even have strikeout problems. A 22% strikeout rate is right at league average. So he hits it an average amount of the time, and he hits it hard, and he has all this pedigree. I mean, this is a profile that's going to work out more often than not. It's just that extreme bad BABIP over the sample of 2 and a bit months held back his surface stats to such a large degree last year. But all it's going to take is better BABIP luck, and he's already probably going to pay off his draft price. And if he gets better BABIP luck and takes another step forward in his underlying skills in his age 23 season, I mean, that's going to be pretty promising for Jac Caglianone. So I think there's still a high ceiling here, and I don't even think the floor is that low. I haven't even mentioned that the Royals moved the fences in too. Just so many reasons to be in on this guy. I think I'm a very big Jac Caglianone fan, despite the fact that he had a 532 OPS. Will you be joining me, Ryan?
Yeah, I am. And the Royals, for all the talk we heard about them looking to add outfielders over the offseason, they added Lane Thomas and Isaac Collins. So it's not as if they have like people on standby just in case Caglianone struggles early on. I mean, they're gonna ride this guy and wait and learn for him to, or wait for him to learn at the major league level. And as you mentioned, he's due some better luck anyway. He almost had a 100-point gap in between his WOBA and expected WOBA. So I like Jac Caglianone a lot. Anthony Santander, my next RBI sleeper. I mean, we can just flush the completely disastrous 2025 season, right? Just 56 games due to injuries, hip, shoulder, and back issues. But he's healthy now. He's in the second year of a $92.5 million contract. The Blue Jays aren't going to give up on this guy as an everyday player already in that second year of that almost $100 million deal. Still just 31 years of age. 2 years removed from a 44 home run, 102 RBI season in 2024. Everybody expected him to come back to earth to some degree from that. But you look at his last 3 seasons in Baltimore, averaged 35 home runs and 95 RBI for the Orioles. Strikeout rate last year, it went from 19.4 all the way to 27.6. Barrel rate went from 11.7 all the way down to 4.5%. I mean, that just screams a guy that was just never really healthy. As I mentioned, just 31 years of age. It's not like this is a age where we expect a guy to start his decline. Should still theoretically be in his prime. We only have him projected about 7th against both righties and lefties right now, which is reasonable given the season that he came off of, but certainly room for him to move up in that batting order and what should be a good Toronto lineup. You can get Anthony Santander at quite a steep discount for a guy who's just 2 years removed from a 44 homer season.
Yeah, and you'll have to completely flush last year if you're going to be willing to take him because it was so bad. And the floor here, I think, is that he comes out with another couple months that look similar and he's just off the roster. I mean, the Blue Jays are very much a contending team. We'll have no patience for him if he gives them a 565 OPS again. But that's baked into the price, and it has not been very long since he was one of the league's better power hitters. You know, I had Santander in my head as more of a free swinger. I think that's because early in his career, he was running some pretty low walk rates, and guys like that, I worry when they hit even their low 30s, that if you're striking out too much and walking not enough, then your power goes from good to average. Sometimes the profile evaporates completely very quickly, especially if you have minimal defensive value. But Santander actually since 2022 has had a walk rate over 8%. Those free swinging ways are not there anymore. So he should be somebody who can age gracefully enough into his early 30s. I have another White Sox. This is 3 White Sox sleepers in one show. Something weird is going on here. But Colson Montgomery, I'm still not totally sold on, but to the extent that I am interested, it would be as an RBI sleeper. Should be somebody whose power allows him to bat near the heart of the lineup. We have him projected as the number 3 hitter against righties, the cleanup man against lefties, despite the fact that Colson Montgomery bats left-handed, but probably not going to platoon for your starting shortstop. Montgomery needed to go all the way down to complex ball last year, rework his swing, and even the reworked version still struck out 29% of the time in his big league debut. But hey, at least that wasn't his 33% strikeout rate in the minors. And this is somebody who has enough power to make up for a real strikeout problem. It was a 14% barrel rate. There are players who hit the ball that hard who can get away with a 29% strikeout rate. Don't even have to be a shortstop to do it. So it's the guy who did get to 21 homers and 55 RBI in less than half a season of work last year, 71 games. I'm still worried that he's not going to hit the ball often enough to be a big leaguer, but he already has. And so I think this is a case, like I said before, players who have real weaknesses, you can get stuck just saying, aha, but he has a weakness. I have solved it. But actually, these guys have made it work with their weaknesses already, and they probably can continue to do so. So Colson Montgomery, as long as the playing time's there, and it should be for a guy who was worth 2.7 WAR, according to Fangraphs last year, in less than half a season, I mean, this guy's going to play, and the power should continue to be there as long as the strikeout problems don't go from really bad to unplayably bad. Do you think Montgomery stays on the right side of the line, Ryan?
Yeah, guys like Colson Montgomery, I feel like are kind of a blind spot evaluating for me. I think probably for a lot of fantasy analysts, because you just see a guy who was just, I mean, not good at all in the minors, but always regarded as a top prospect. The skill set was theoretically there and did a lot of good things last year. It's just hard to make that leap that he's just figured it out. But sometimes these guys that are just talented like that just figure it out. So it's a little bit of a blind leap of faith, but as you mentioned, he did show the ability, even with the flaws, to make it work at the major league level last year. So certainly a lot of power upside with Colson Montgomery, a lot of power upside with this guy as well. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on as the Phillies fan. Kind of a weird a signing that seemed to come out of nowhere. He's a little bit of a Nick Castellanos, except with a better glove to me, Adolis Garcia. But just as far as the pure landing spot, I don't think you could have asked for a better one for Adolis Garcia. He's going to a great ballpark, going to a great lineup. And for all his flaws, he has been a really good power hitter, averaged 28 home runs and 92 RBI, as well as 619 plate appearances per season. A lot of durability for Adolis Garcia. That's in his 5 full seasons with the Rangers. Look at the hard hit rate, the average exit velocity, the barrel rate, all fairly typical for him last year. The strikeout rate was even down. So maybe there was a little bit of bad luck for Adolis Garcia. Citizens Bank Park is more neutral for right-handed bats, but it's still much better than Globe Life Field was. And we have him projected for 6th versus righties and 5th versus lefties. So maybe not the most ideal spot for RBIs, but going to be part of a really good lineup in a great hitter's park. And there's a possibility that Adolis Garcia could just, turn into Nick Castellanos, where you just don't want to put him in the lineup anymore. Hopefully without the clash with the manager as well. But Adolis Garcia's it's possible he's near the cliff or at the cliff, but I still see a guy who hits the ball really hard, Strikeout rate was actually down last season, and he's in a really good situation. So I like the favorable landing spot for Adolis Garcia. I could see at least a moderate bounce back for him.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him because I'm not sure I was going to. As a Phillies fan, I think this is one where I've had trouble seeing this signing objectively. I'm only seeing all the ways that this is going to go wrong. I'm only seeing a Nick Castellanos clone taking over for Castellanos in right. Obviously, the glove is going to be much better. So, from a real world perspective and for the Phillies pitchers, I like this move. Garcia is an example of that phenomenon that I was talking about earlier with Santander, where hitters who have bad strikeout and walk numbers, as they get into their early 30s and the power steps back a bit, it can fall apart pretty quickly. And we've sort of seen that with Garcia. The WRC plus the last 2 years, 94 and 83. If he continues going in that direction, he's not going to have regular at bats in the second half of the season. But as you mentioned, the strikeout rate actually did improve. The hard hit numbers aren't really falling off that much yet, so we could get one more good year of Adolis Garcia. I'll give you another Philly, though, one who you can get in a similar range of the draft, and that is Alec Bohm, who is much cheaper than he's been in past years. Is that because he's coming off a down season for the Phillies? I would imagine that's why, or maybe it's because people were afraid that Alec Bohm could get traded. But that hasn't happened, and I don't think that he's good enough for another contender to really go out of their way to add him to their roster. So if Alec Bohm is still a Philly, then he's still probably the cleanup man. That's where he was at the end of the season. And if you're cleaning up for a pretty good lineup in a good hitter's park, you're going to post some high RBI total like Alec Bohm did in both 23 and 24. He had 97 RBI in both of those years. Never been a great power bat because he pounds the ball into the ground too much, and I expect that to continue. So this is exclusively about lineup position, but I think Bohm has it. I think he's the cleanup man. I think he's an everyday player. Worry a little bit about Aiden Miller, a top infield prospect arriving eventually, could take Bohm's spot, perhaps. But if he's still an above average bat, I think the Phillies just ride it out and let him play out his contract year here as a 4, maybe 5 hitter who drives in a lot of runs despite only hitting maybe 13 homers. I think he's a useful enough option if you've missed out on the early third baseman. You've got a third base eligible guy going in the same range of the draft, right, Ryan?
I do. Carlos Correa of the Houston Astros again, and performed very well for the Astros after that surprise trade last season. Hit 290, 355, 430 down the stretch for Houston. Did not bat lower than 4th for them. We have him projected to bat 3rd versus righties and 4th versus lefties for the Astros this season. He's obviously dealt with plenty of injuries over his career, but has been pretty healthy the last 3 years. He's averaged, not average, excuse me. Last year he had 144 games and 584 plate appearances. That's his highest the last 3 years. Hard hit rate, average exit velocity last season above his career norms. The expected stats say he should have been better than he was. Still only 31 years old. Seems like he should be older than that, but theoretically still could be in his prime. And, Correa going back to Houston, you can't help but feel like there could be just a kind of a anecdotal boost from back in his old stomping grounds as well. I mean, I'm fairly confident as long as he can stay on the field that Carlos Correa is going to be pretty good. And I know he's going to bat in the middle of that lineup. So given where you have to take him in the draft, which is very late, I think he's worth it if you're looking for a potential power boost at that stage of your draft.
Yeah, Correa had a 905 OPS just 2 years ago. In 86 games. That was sandwiched between 2 seasons where his OPS was in the low 700s. But I think he's one of those players that if you buy them coming off their down years and avoid them coming off their good years, you'll probably have some pretty good performances for his range of the draft. We're going to wrap things up with 3 first basemen here to end the show, just by coincidence, starting with Kyle Manzardo, who we project to be the cleanup man against righties for the Guardians. We currently project him to sit against lefties, although I notice that he is not projected in a platoon for roster resource, so this is a debatable one, you could say. And I certainly would like Manzardo to be a true everyday player if I'm going to have him down as one of my RBI sleepers here. But I think he took enough of a step forward last year that if I'm the Guardians, I'm starting to view him as somebody I want in the lineup as often as possible. It was still a low batting average for Manzardo last year, 234, exactly the same as it was in his 53-game debut. But he got the walks up from under 6% to 9%. That helped get the on-base percentage up 30 points to 313. Power took a slight step forward as well, going from a 9.5% barrel rate to a 12% barrel rate. This is a barrel rate that's driven by a very high fly ball approach. He keeps on the ground less than 30% of the time. So that's going to keep the batting average down, but will lead to a lot of homers, a lot of doubles, a lot of sac flies, the sort of thing that should get you plenty of RBI. Manzardo had 70 last year in 531 trips to the plate. I think he could push 80 if he gets closer to a true everyday role. Again, not 100% sure that's going to happen. David Fry could start against lefties, but right now we have it as CJ Kefus at first and Kyle Manzardo at DH, both of them being lefty. Fry probably only starts, well, I was going to say he definitely only starts over one of them against lefties. I don't think he can start at both positions at once. So I think at the worst case, Manzardo is a strong side platoon and a half, the way I'm looking at this lineup for now. And I think that's enough for the counting stats to be pretty good for Kyle Manzardo.
Yeah, not great alternatives, as you mentioned. David Fry can hit lefties, but they got to cover both the DH spot and the first base slot. So, and given the year he came off of, I think Manzardo's got to be regarded as higher in the pecking order than CJ Kefus, at least certainly going into the season. So I like that call. Jake Burger is going to be my final RBI sleeper. Struggled through a wrist injury last season that really hampered his power. He's healthy now after getting that wrist surgically repaired. Hard hit rate, average exit velocity, barrel rate, all still excellent last season for Jake Burger, but wrist made it, he's talked about the wrist made it really hard for him to pull the ball. His pull air rate and his pull rate in general was just way down, just atypical for him. You look back from 2023 to 2024, he averaged 32 home runs and 78 RBI. Did that, by the way, a chunk of that for Skip Schumacher, who is once again his manager. So he's got the good manager vibes back, and no competition really at all at first base for Jake Burger. I think they're counting on him to be a middle of the order presence. We have him projected to bat fifth against righties and fourth against lefties, so a pretty favorable spot in that Rangers lineup. And he could kind of fall into that category you were mentioned earlier about guys on the wrong side of 30 that it could just fall apart quickly for them if they're not making enough contact. But he'll turn just 30 a little after opening day, so maybe not quite at that danger zone yet. And certainly has his flaws, Jake Burger, but very good at making hard contact and hitting home runs. And I think they're gonna need him to do that on an everyday basis. So I like him to bounce back from a power perspective in 2026.
Yeah, I think as long as Burger is healthy enough to be on the field, I think the power numbers should certainly be there. He doesn't walk at all, and that led to a 269 on base percentage last year. That's a problem, but the power certainly has been good enough for most of his career that I think it's going to be okay as long as Jake Burger can stay on the field. The final guy for today's show will be Andrew Vaughn, who you can get just outside of pick 300. Vaughn, of course, picked up for cheap by the Brewers last year. Really took off once he got to Milwaukee. In 64 games, he hit 308, had an 869 OPS. Strikeout rate all the way down to 15%. Combine that with an 11% barrel rate. Looks like the kind of player who would have been drafted third overall like he was back in 2019. It really just did not work for him on the south side of Chicago, but he looked like a different player last year. He should be able to hit probably fifth against both lefties and righties. Andrew Vaughn being a right-hander means that he's not going to fall onto the large side of a platoon, and as long as he hits well, he's not going to fall onto the short side of a platoon either. The Brewers have a bit of a weird situation where Vaughn plays more than Jake Bauers, but Jake Bauers does get in there against some righties, so maybe the counting stats will be hurt a little bit for Andrew Vaughn, but I think if he continues to hit like he did for the Brewers last year, I don't think you're going to take him out of the lineup that much. Maybe you're not going to get huge power numbers compared to what you'd like for a first baseman, but for a first baseman who, again, is available, I guess in DCs, he's going with a pick of 283, so not quite outside top 300, but pretty close to it. I think in this range of the draft, there's enough playing time here where as long as you believe that the guy he was in Milwaukee is closer to the guy he's going to be going forward than the player he was in Chicago, I think you're going to get some good numbers really across the board, not just in RBI for Andrew Vaughn. You buying it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's difficult to know how much to read into those last few months with the Brewers, but obviously the pedigree is still there. I don't think it's going to be like there's very little chance of him being the star that we thought he could be, but just as far as a 20 plus homer, 80 plus RBI everyday first baseman, I think that's certainly well within the range of outcomes. And where you have to take him in the draft, you'll certainly be happy with that level of production.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our Runs and RBI Sleepers, our compilers episode of this Category Sleepers series. Really great to be back with you, Ryan. Thanks to everybody who hung out in the chat. And we will be back next weekend with probably homers and batting average. We do power and contact up next here. Does that sound good, Ryan?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. We'll have our power sleepers and our contact sleepers next Saturday here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Fantrax.